Beth Merrigan, and next to Beth is David Hughes, standing in for Isaac Solomon, who's an apology. On my right is Jake McVicker and David Brown. We also have members of the staff at the table, Andrew Godswell and Jake Boswell. We'll start with a statement of acknowledgement. We'd like to acknowledge that this land that we meet on today is the traditional lands for the Kaurna people, and that we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. We also acknowledge the Kaurna people as the custodians of Greater Adelaide region, and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still as important to the living Kaurna people today. The attendance record is, I've gone through the members that are at the table, but with acknowledging there's an apology due to sickness from Isaac Solomon. The first item is confirmation of the minutes of the meeting, which was held on the 16th of January. They've been distributed to members. Would someone like to move their adoption? Beth, thank you. And a seconder is David Brown. All in favour? That's carried. Thank you. Business arising from the minutes, is there any? Declaration of interests of members of the panel. I'd like to declare in respect of the first item that about 15 years ago I was the owner, part owner of a property which is located in the locality. It is about 15 years ago. It was the location of my commercial office, but I don't believe it's an interest that requires me to withdraw from the meeting. The first is the reports on applications to be assessed and 25 18th Street. Jake, could you introduce the item, and we'll have any questions that might be relevant.
Yeah, thank you, through the chair. So this is an application for the construction of 2 new residential flat buildings and the conversion of an existing state heritage building into a residential flat building. There are associated structures like a shelter shed and a canopy entranceway. And the application includes some alterations to the state heritage building, as well as the demolition of a outbuilding on the site as well. This is a site in the established neighbourhood zone with a range of overlays that apply. If there's any questions, happy to take questions on it.
Thank you, Jake. I've got a couple, and do members of the panel have any questions of Jake? Yes, Jake.
Through the chair. Jake, we received some late correspondence to this matter a day or so ago. Have staff considered that? Obviously staff have considered that, but do you have a position on that, or any further information you could provide on that as it relates to the outbuilding?
Yeah, thanks for the question, through the chair. So the late information, I believe, has been received and distributed to panel members as well as the applicant. In respect of the information, it relates to some queries about historical aerial imagery. There was some background provided in the report relating to the aerial imagery. So that was provided for context to the panel members. It is noted in the report that it is a bit inconclusive, and the additional information obviously supports the fact that it is inconclusive in terms of what it shows. Notwithstanding that, the view is that the outbuilding is not part of the state heritage listing in any case, so that information is noted, but it's not considered to fundamentally change the report before the panel.
Just a quick follow-on question from that, I guess, is to do with the state heritage listing. And as part of that listing, can you just clarify what is part of the listing and what is not part of the listing? You've commented on the outbuilding, the other element probably is the fences.
So through the chair, with respect to the outbuilding in particular, on that matter, advice was received from Heritage SA that did note the outbuilding as not being part of the heritage, the state heritage listing. The specific listing in the Planning and Design Code is noted in the attachments. I can grab that up and read that out in 2 seconds. So for the panel's context, the listing is defined as the Overway Hotel, formerly Railway Family Hotel. Just to further note that as well, with respect to its spatial listing as well, it does relate solely to allotment 16. This subject site does comprise 4 allotments, but allotment 16 is the only, is simply the site where the hotel is located, not the outbuilding.
Questions? David.
Just a question on page 15, there's figure 8, which is the outbuilding. It really is a distinctive feature of this whole site and the actual old hotel. And it did sort of link then into the hotel where the old toilets were and it really made that whole site. It just seems to be sympathetic, or actually probably more historic in some ways than the rest of the hotel because of the additions, but there's just no heritage listing, there's no description in any documents, there's no real mention of outbuildings. So there's a question.
So through the chair, there is some, through the documentation that has informed, I guess, the current heritage listing to where it is, there has been some changes. They are detailed in the report as part of attachment 2. So there is reference to the allotments that are comprised the site, so the 4 allotments, but from staff research there's no specific listing to the building. I understand there is sort of historic references to the building on the site, but in terms of the documentation, the outbuilding has never been formally part or captured within the listing. Notwithstanding that, as part of the report, the outbuilding is considered to form part of the historic streetscape, and that's been considered, and that would ultimately be a decision for the panel as to whether the decision on whether it would be acceptable or appropriate to demolish.
Anything else, David? Beth? Thanks. In one of the reports, I think it's the historic, the heritage impact assessment prepared by the applicant, there's reference made to the historic... Closer to the mic. Is that better? In the heritage assessment prepared by the applicant, there's reference to the historic adjacency overlay. When I look at the code, it doesn't appear to be relevant when you interrogate the code. Can you confirm that it is not relevant?
Just through the chair, I may not understand the question. Is this in regards to adjacent heritage buildings?
There's the heritage assessment prepared by Sam Hosking. It discusses the historic adjacency overlay, as if it's relevant. I don't think you've made reference to it. I can't see that it's relevant, but I wanted confirmation of that.
Yes, so with respect to heritage adjacency, insofar as my assessment goes, I'm not of the view that there is a substantial impact to existing heritage buildings in the locality. I have, I believe, spoken about the sporadic heritage buildings in the area, and they are obviously identified in the code, but yeah, my report does make reference, but insofar as that, I don't believe there's a direct substantial impact.
In respect of the additional information that was presented, that's the photographic information by Rick Bailey. I understand your answer to be that it's clearly not part of the state heritage listing and therefore nothing changes. But I think we need to know whether his investigations are correct or not, rather than simply relying on the fact that nothing turns on it. Can you be clearer about whether your opinion on that photograph is correct in terms of Rick Bailey's submission?
Thank you. Through the chair. So my assessment relates to the relationship of the application with the State Heritage Place overlay and the outbuilding as it sits within the historic area overlay. The aerial imagery that's been provided is for the context of the panel. So notwithstanding if there are, I guess, disagreements or if the aerial imagery is incorrect, I'm not of the opinion that it changes the substance of my report.
Can we put the State Heritage overlay on the screen, please?
The server's down, it's down for maintenance.
All right. Okay. So it's not available.
It closed down on
But
Thursday.
it's one of the attachments on that report, isn't it?
What page on the...
I don't know. It'll be towards the end.
Yeah, it's a very large parcel. It just froze because it was not open.
the State Heritage Overlay. Can you locate it in your report, Jake? You've got some extracts, haven't you?
Yeah, but the actual, that map you're after is not in any...
Not the map, no, not the map, just the State Heritage Overlay.
The provisions.
Yeah. Pardon? Or page 180. Let's start. I wanted the State Heritage one initially. 188. Can we go to page 188? Okay, if we could go to PO 1.7, that essentially says you shouldn't demolish a state heritage item, and that's, from my reading of it, the most specific policies that relate to the item itself. But if we look at P 1.1 and 1.2 and 1.3 and 1.4, they're really contextual policies that are not so much concerned about the state heritage item, but what's happening around it. 1.2, the massing and scale, and my emphasis being siting of development maintains the heritage values of the state heritage place. I would just like to highlight that sort of emphasis in the state heritage overlay and potentially seek some comment from Jake about this, that the fact that it's what's listed and what's not is important, but it's not the end of the story with the state heritage overlay, which in the balance of policies is probably our most important set, along with the historic area overlay, and that can be stronger in, if we go to that, which I think Jake helped us telling us it's on 183, page 183, where the message is that themes, historic themes need to be reinforced and protected, and in this case it's a hotel with a setting, and then those policies support that, particularly PO 7.1 and 7.3. Now, with a bit of a disadvantage because we don't have that all clearly in front of us. But if you could take some time to have a look at that and think about that question, Jake, and maybe give us some comment at the end after we've heard from the representatives and the applicant. Any other questions? We'll move to the submissions. What we've found in the past, we have a very dense set of collections of points of view on this, which we've presumably all read, and there's short allocations of time. What we've done in the past is gone round the table and from panel members to say, look, what I really want to hear about is, you're entitled to say whatever you want, but if you want to focus it and draw our attention to something, we're going to give you a guide on that. But you could ignore us if you want. You can submit as you would want. David, is there anything in particular you'd like to hear from the representatives of the applicant?
Representatives and applicant.
Both.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, well, it is first and foremost in respect to the heritage element, the state heritage element, and then the historic character overlay and the points of view there. And then further, of course, then is the new development and how its form complements the setting and context of the site in a design architectural sense. And I do have some technical issues around parking and other things, but primarily it's the setting.
Thank you. Jake? Okay. David?
Just a bit more on the streetscape and how the outbuildings sort of meet with that streetscape as well, maybe.
Beth?
Thank you. I'm happy to hear anything, but in particular, in relation to the adaptive reuse of the building, I just wondered whether there was any consideration of staging between the new development and the retention and adaptive reuse of the building.
Thank you. From my point of view, I probably have indicated to a degree what I'm concerned about, whether the state heritage policies clearly don't demolish a state heritage building, but also a very strong question on the contextual question. This photograph that's on the screen at the moment, which is the view from coming from Overway Bridge, is probably the most significant vista of the building. And I'm not that one, but the one above it. If you can enlarge it, that'd be good. The question is about, if you take away the stable building and develop as is proposed, the extent to which the setting for the state heritage building is compromised. Is it or is it not? Okay, the first representative is Rick Bailey. Rick, would you like to join us at the table? Next to David Brown. And for the record, just give us your name and just a reminder, there's an allocation of 5 minutes. Oh, I pressed that, yeah.
No one told me that, sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah, Ricky Bailey. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to my representation. Really for me, I know my representation was probably a little bit more detailed than others, haven't seen the other representations, but I can boil it down to one core issue, which is, I think, trying to squeeze too many flats onto a small property that is shared with a state heritage building. I won't labour the point on the outbuilding because you seem to have talked about it a fair bit. It's something I'm interested in making sure it stays there. But I will point out in the heritage impact statement, just a quote from it, the heritage integrity of the former Terminus Hotel has been reduced from changes over the course of its history. So you're not going to reduce the heritage integrity any more than by demolishing that outbuilding. So I think that's a thing to consider. You sort of talked about the streetscape. So with the setback, in the response to the representations, the applicant did point out there was other buildings or other developments in the area with a similar setback, but those are just examples. They're exceptions. They're not the pattern for the area, and in particular, 18th Street is a beautiful old street, part of Bassett Town, where the only buildings that are on the frontage are over 150 years old. So the rest of it is all set back, and those old buildings stand out. I'm concerned with the parking because I use that railway station. The problem with the station is you get off the platform on the northern end, you have to, and then you feed into the northern end of the car park directly opposite the hotel, and those parks fill up fast. The council report does a calculation based on 12 two-bedroom flats, but my understanding from Table 2 parking requirements, there's 10 two-bedroom flats and 2 three-bedroom flats, and the applicant does concede in the response that there should be 18 parks, but doesn't explain why there's only 16 in the design. Excuse me. That vista, so I find that important. I didn't think about it a lot because I didn't think it was part of what you discussed, but the entry to Gawler has changed over the years with the Nexi, and so there's 2 ways to come in now. It's via Red Banks Road or it's via Angle Vale / Two Wells Road. The Two Wells Road will bring you the Overway Bridge, and that's really your introduction to Gawler. And it's a beautiful introduction to Gawler. It represents our heritage as an old town, and I am concerned with what the development could do to that vista. And in the Town of Gawler's mission statement, they talk about being dedicated to enhancing the livable urban environment, and with these being recognised in the report as being some of the smallest flats in the area, and also having lower than standard private open space, I find that that's not really in line with the mission statement for the town. And they'll be hot. You see all that bitumen there, they're north facing, so they're going to cop it pretty hot. Now clearly you can deal with that with air conditioning, but the Town of Gawler's invested heavily in solar, and that's to reduce our carbon footprint and to improve our sustainability. Well, this proposal does neither of those, and in fact I see it contradicts the Gawler Community Plan, because the plan talks about balancing growth with sustainability, and in this instance we're growing but the sustainability is out the window. So in summary, I see that the heritage fails, the setback fails, the livability through the heat fails, and so why does it fail on so many fronts? It's because we're trying to cram so many flats into that small property, pushing the regulation boundaries and not providing an argument as to why this level of density is actually required. Any questions?
Thank you for being so concise. Any questions from the panel members? No, thank you, Ricky.
Beauty.
Adrian Shackley. Right. So you're okay, Rosa, thank you.
Hi, I'm Rosa. I'm going to be a little bit more brief, but I did agree with everything that the previous speaker also put in. So I'm a long-time resident of Gawler, and I commute to and from Adelaide to work. So when I get off the train at Gawler, that's basically the first building I see every day. It's a beautiful part of Gawler. It's part of this historic precinct with the railway station. There's a lot of history surrounding that area, and the shed building would have likely been part of the functionality of that historic precinct. So I understand, as you said, it's not currently listed under state heritage, but we can't sort of, as these things become more and more rare, as they continue to get knocked down and how few there are in the town, you're not going to get it back. Maybe what we review should be listed under heritage should be updated as those things change. So I would just like to say that it is a very important building. Although it's not listed by state heritage, it has a lot of harkening back to what the function of that precinct actually was. It's also, as was pointed out, a major entryway into Gawler. So, whether you're coming in via train or via car, it is like one of the most prominent buildings that you'll come to entering into the town. before entering the more historic part of the town. So that's my feeling on the historical importance of it and the character of the area, helping to maintain that character and story. But also the development and the way that it's been designed, I agree. It feels like it's cramming too much in. There's no green space or very little green space. There's a lot of, very high density housing that they've proposed. And the question is, why does it need to be that dense? Maybe they could take out a couple of the buildings and it would be a lot more sort of like sensitive to the area around it. And we've heard about setbacks and we've heard about distance from boundaries and things like that. But just generally, it just feels crowded. It's not sort of these new developments that are happening down in near the train in Manapara. Like, I understand the desire to live close to the train, but Gawler is a pretty special place, and unless we make a decision to maintain that special character, particularly in these historically significant areas, it won't be that way forever. We'll just become another part of the northern suburbs that people won't distinguish from those other towns and areas. So that's about what I have to say. Thanks.
Any questions of Rosa? No? Thank you very much. Adrian.
Thank you. Just checking how my time is. Got a few other people who've allocated me their time.
Yeah, and I have communicated with them that we need to, you'll be speaking presumably on behalf of the...
Gawler Environment,
yeah,
myself,
yeah, and
Judy and Julie.
yes, but it's really designed for them to give their being
Okay.
representatives, so it's really yourself and Gerhard.
Okay.
Thank you.
No, they couldn't come, so that. Just first up, I gave David a copy of this piece of paper, which is a record from the rates records for Manapara West Council for 1858. And I sent a copy of it to Jake a few weeks ago. After I located it, the highlighted part is Thomas Martin, Lot 2, Gawler West, public house and stables, and a value, so 1858. So what the purpose of producing that is to show that there was a stables building built on the site immediately at the same time as the hotel, which was in our submission, saying, well, we think that's the case, but this definitely confirms it, so I'd like to table that.
Thank you.
And I've got a spare, I can pass that copy around. Okay. Just on the state heritage listing, the maps are pretty crook, but there's a chance the shed's actually on the corner of the lot with the hotel on it, the way it shows up on my map. So that's worth a look. It hasn't been dealt with, but the application never mentioned the demolition of the shed or the demolition and reconstruction of the walls. So it was raised in our submission as to whether that's a proper application. So no one's dealt with that, but it's there. In relation to the shed, this is really interesting. I've worked it out. I mean, it's been a mystery for years, that shed. It looks odd, it is odd. And quite convinced now that pretty much like Jake's thing, I mean, I was the one who produced the 1935 aerial map from Victoria, which sits in the council, so I'm pleased it gets used. Clearly the old stables building was sort of the northern part. So there's the wall still there, and that nib wall which sort of sits right on the road. That's clearly part of the old stables building. You can tell that from sort of looking at the holes in the walls and things like that. It's a classic old stables building on the northern side. But also clearly what's happened is that when that building was pulled down for whatever reason, part of it, that they have reused that material for the remainder of the building. And my proof of that is that the brickwork in that building is all 65mm thick bricks. In the hotel, in the shed, That's the remaining part of the stables, and in the new part of the building, which is now called the barn, or used to be called the barn, on the southern side. All of those bricks that are in there are 65mm thick bricks. You could get them up till about, 1870. After that, they went to 70mm bricks, and by, 1900, they were on 75, 76mm bricks. You couldn't get those bricks in 1940 or whenever that building was rebuilt, except from a demolition of a place. Now, you can now, you can go and buy new ones, but you can't buy old ones. So I don't think there's any doubt that that reconstructed part of the shed has been reconstructed from the materials that were taken from the bit that's missing. Now, it's a bit messy, that shed. It's not that well constructed. Anyone would be happy to have it better constructed, but I think that's right. And it's also interesting, as shown in the pictures that we produced, that the two old stable doors seem to have been kept and put on that new building on the eastern side. There's a picture of it in our submission. And I should report as well, I had a visit to looking at the site with Simon Zeller, who's a well-recognised local heritage restoration builder, and he was also pretty happy. That's exactly the position with that. What's there now is sort of partly it's original and partly it's reconstruction from a knocking over part of the original. The issue about heritage adjacency is an interesting one. It's pretty clear. I mean, development includes anything that affects the heritage value of a state heritage place. It doesn't have to be on that site, it can be somewhere else. So this is clearly development. But that's the heritage adjacency thing is the basis on which the state heritage provided comment on the walls and the shed. I mean, normally they would just say, okay, no, state heritage place, but they are, for an individual item, their remit goes beyond that to look at the impact of development on a neighbouring block or across the road or, whatever is seen to affect the heritage value of the hotel in this case. Now, I have to say, for the life of me, I do not understand Heritage SA's response that the wall that's on 18th Street is very important to the setting of the hotel, and that's very important that be kept, and the shed, it's much more iconic in a sense in terms of Gawler. This is the only one that's anywhere near here, is somehow not significant for the setting of the hotel. That, to me, just defeats logic. Now, I understand Heritage SA, very concerned to get reuse of old buildings, and they bend over backwards to help people do it, but, a comment like that just doesn't add up to me. I don't think it's right.
So 30 seconds for this submission, Adrian.
Okay. So and in lieu of the discussion earlier about, what's the effect of it not being listed, well, pretty clearly now the planning code makes major provision for places that are not listed, which is excellent. And this one, which fell through the cracks in listing, I mean, you can't believe that it's what has happened. I mean, I've watched this process for 40 years, and I can't believe that somehow that shed and the walls didn't get listed as contributory places, local heritage places, or even state heritage places. So it's just odd.
Okay. Do you want to move over to the
Yep.
Geha submission?
So, so well, just a comment. State Heritage also in their response talked about this outbuilding being circa 1860s. Well, they obviously don't have much of a clue. It's 1857. If you've got the record now, they could also check those sort of things. And we've got quite a bit of discussion in the report about setting based on borough charter, and I think that's absolutely crucial to understanding what setting in terms of the planning code and state heritage responses, etc., should be dealing with. So in terms of the historic area overlay, I think that's the key in this case to working out what happens with demolition, because the things aren't demolished if they demonstrate historic characteristics as expressed in the historic area statement. And on any criteria, I mean, the wording's there to look at. The buildings associated with the original development of the Gawler Railway Station are an absolute key to the Gawler South historic area statement. You know, that's the reason the whole Gawler South subdivision happened in 1858 was because the Gawler South, the Gawler train station landed there in 1857. Bingo. They sold all the blocks off, and Gawler West was the same. Got in a few months earlier. So that's absolutely crucial. I mean, this building, this is the first hotel, was the first building built in Gawler South. And so the hotel and the stables building, first buildings. There might have been something down on Adelaide Road earlier on, just on the entrance, I'm not 100% sure, but on this, near enough, it was absolutely the start of things happening once the railway station came in. Just another comment which is in the thing, you know, Heritage SA says there's been a proper recording of the stone building by the applicant. Well, just one basic error, it's got 6 layers of bricks in the coins, not 5. Now, you know, you don't make mistakes like that if you get things right. I mean, the documentation of the old building that's put in there is not very helpful. It's just a set of drawings and they're wrong, in certain respects at least. With the stone walls, I mean, we're concerned that a third at least of those stone walls is gone. I mean, the application talks about restoring the stone walls, but actually a whole lot of it's gone missing. There's 3 entranceways along the front, there's a missing part of the driveway, and that wall on the eastern side, half of that's not proposed to be reconstructed. So there's a lot will go missing, but also there's no detail about how to reconstruct it. There's all these statements about, yeah, we'll do it sort of like it is. That wall's really messy. It's been fiddled with a couple of times. You can't just say that we'll reproduce it like it is, because the pillars that are along there are not consistent. They've been altered. So, you know, you need a proper drawing and a proper document that says, well, here's what we're going to do, not just, you know, we'll restore it more or less like it is. It's a completely unique wall. There isn't another one like it in Gawler the way it's structured. It's very unusual and needs some serious detail to get it right. Okay, I think from our point of view, 2 less units on the place, keep the shed, look after the wall, you know, I agree about, and the open space is a problem. I mean, it just doesn't get near it. It's supposed to have 25%, it's got about 12, I think. So, you know, something's gone wrong there with the scheme, it needs to be fixed. You can't count car parks as open space, you know, that's not in the rules. That's what they sort of pretended to do. Is that my time up, Chair?
You've still got another minute,
Have I?
which surprises me. Really.
I'm going well. No, I don't think I'll get any other. Yeah, if you've read the reports, I think that covers it. I thought the heritage impact statement was okay, but the applicant access planning response to submissions didn't even respond to a number of submissions, just ignored them. I find that really odd. I mean, to put a whole lot of photos and information in there about certain things and ignored other things. I think you can work that out as the panel, what's going on, but the comment about the shed was really well, see the historic impact, heritage impact statement. The heritage impact statement just said, well, it's not in very good condition, so we don't, and Heritage SA doesn't have a problem knocking it over. Well, Heritage SA aren't the decision maker. You are. You're the ones who have to decide whether that shed stays or not. And making a comment saying Heritage SA doesn't have a problem, well, that's not the answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. Any questions of Adrian? David?
Just, you mentioned that the shed is fairly iconic. I'm just wondering, because of that design and how it fits in and everything else, is there anything else like that in Gawler? Your knowledge, it's fairly...
While I think about that, one of the interesting things when those typical sheds had this sort of skillion roof with the slope. What was interesting when they reconstructed the other side, which sort of fools people, is they reconstructed the skillion in a similar way in reverse on the southern side. So it's sort of, if you're just driving past, you think, oh, that's the old stables building. Well, that's not quite right, but that, yeah, they are around, but they're rare. I mean, you get the two-storey loft buildings, which, you know, there's about 10 of them around Gawler. These sort of skillion roof ones, we've lost a few. The panels knocked a few over. There's one at Williston at the back of that new physio place, that went. One fell over at the back of Tortola last year. That didn't have a roof on, but it was same design. You know, this sort of three-sided with the angled down roof, and then you have the storage sort of area in the back for things. Yeah.
Any other questions, David? Beth? Jake?
Through the chair, thank you, Adrian. Always very knowledgeable and helpful, and I think you might have half solved the puzzle to a degree.
Yeah.
So there's no doubt a stable or shed was on the original site in 1857. And at some point in time, that shed was demolished or suffered damage and it was reconstructed to the south. Putting the pieces of the puzzle together then, based on the information in the report, are you satisfied that that perhaps happened between that period of 1939 to 45?
When you look at those two aerial photos, definitely it's there in 1935 in its original position. When it becomes changed is a bit less clear, but probably not too much later after that.
Excellent. So I think that was one of my questions that I alluded to earlier in the discussion, but I think you've answered it for me, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I think the proof of the reconstruction is the bricks.
David? I'm not sure whether I caught the significance of this. I think I understand it. Are you saying that the application, in the way it's presented, doesn't adequately cover the fact that it involves the reconstruction of the perimeter walls?
And the demolition of the shed. Well, it's on the front of the, when it was advertised, residential flat building, construction of two-storey residence.
That's the way it was advertised, but you were implying that the application, the way it was submitted...
No. I'm saying the way it was presented in the...
Okay.
And it's the same in the council officer's recommendation.
Yes.
It's listed there without...
Right.
Could be a problem.
Well, it depends what the application is, really, what they were applying for, but then I just want to clarify whether you'd seen the application itself, as opposed to...
Sorry, I have, yes. Sorry, there was just one point I forgot to mention. In the conditions and whatever, there's no proper mention of archaeological stuff. In Heritage SA, they make a recommendation about archaeological sort of things. In the officer's recommendation, there's a thing about Aboriginal heritage, but the stuff about archaeology is gone, or not there. Council used to have a really standard provision to say, you know, if this is one of these really old sites, which this clearly is, you're going to find things there. Well, here are the processes that you need to follow.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
James, I understand you're speaking on behalf. If you'd like to come to the table.
Can I be heard? Is that on? Thanks. Thank you for the opportunity to respond. I've taken note of the particular issues that you've outlined as being helpful for focus, and I'm very grateful for that approach. I must say it's a very effective way of getting through this. You've got a very detailed report, and I commend that to you. I simply say that the proposal satisfies the code performance outcomes in all respects. There are some areas where there are slight departures from the DTF provisions, but of course they're not requirements, they're guidelines. If I focus then on the heritage issues, firstly, this design is a very well-designed scheme that's been designed by architects familiar with heritage conservation, so it's not just slapped together by a building designer, bless them. The Council's Heritage Advisor generally supports this proposal, albeit encouraging the retention of the outbuilding. And it was referred to the Heritage Minister who also supports the proposal. Firstly, the certified copy of the register, that is the State Heritage Register, which is the record of what constitutes the heritage place, lists the heritage place only as allotment 16 in file plan 27690. So that is that allotment 16. So it's only what is within that land that is a state heritage place. That is unambiguous and unequivocal. So we'll come to this spatial point in a moment, because that's the way the code and the code overlays work. The code is express in the interpretation provisions that the overlays are spatial application of policy. So the heritage adjacency overlay doesn't apply spatially anywhere than where it is designated to apply. Similarly, the state heritage overlay doesn't apply except spatially where it is designated by the code to apply. And that's very important in this instance. What is...
James, can I just clarify that?
Sure.
You're saying that even anything talking about contextual questions for the state heritage place, one must just confine that overlay to lot 16 or whatever it is. It can't go beyond that.
Correct. I mean,
okay.
It obviously depends on which matter you're looking at, but you look at the spatial application of that policy. Yeah. Okay. And that's clear from the introductory provisions of the code and the interpretation provisions. And again, this is all important. I'm going to come back to your contextual question, which is, I think, probably at the heart of this. The Heritage Branch have considered the demolition of the outbuilding. They have expressly considered the question of setting where it's relevant, and in my submission, they have got it right. Again, it's difficult to see clearly, but there's a small section of the wall that is within allotment 16. So to that extent, that portion of the wall is part of the setting, but the setting beyond the heritage place, that is beyond allotment 16, is irrelevant. So to the extent that they're talking about the outbuilding or the old wall beyond allotment 16, that cannot form part of the setting for the purposes of those policies. And I'll come back to what the adjacency policy says, because it too uses the term setting. The Heritage Minister is plainly the preeminent authority on state heritage items. Now, it's not the High Court. You're not bound in the same way that, as you would were at a High Court pronouncement, but it would be very unusual, very irregular as a matter of public administration for the panel to depart from that advice without very good reason. And I'd say to you, there's no good reason in any of the papers or anything that's been put to you. The photographs and the conjecture, I don't think Mr. Shackley was around at the time that this was built or rebuilt, but his speculation about what happened with what, when and how, as interesting as that musing may well be, it's absolutely irrelevant because you simply assess this as it is today. The outbuilding is not part of the State Heritage Place, and it doesn't matter when it was built where. It is there now, that's what you assess. That's the approach that the Heritage Branch have taken in any event. Fundamentally, there's nothing in the code that supports, let alone requires, the retention of the outbuilding. It's, just to look at it now, it would never get approved. It is a very ordinary, unattractive structure that has been modified. The holes that can be seen show that it's been partly dismantled. It is by no means of any aesthetic value. There's nothing in the code which supports its retention. If we look at the adjacency overlay first, and this is coming back to the question of setting in particular, the adjacency overlay...
Sorry, James. I asked a question earlier about and if you have better information, but there's 3 heritage sets of overlays. There's state, the historic area overlay, and the adjacency one.
Yes.
And when you interrogate the code, the adjacency doesn't come up.
Well, I think it does.
Hosking says it does.
Well, I think it does. If you look at your code search, if you look at...
That's what I was interested in getting clarity about earlier. So you say it does apply.
Now, I might have my numbering wrong, but I think it's page 167 of your papers. Lists the overlays. Now, this is the, if you like, the computer spitting out what is relevant. If you just enlarge that.
Page 167, you said?
Correct. Now, I read that as all 3 of those are listed. Area, adjacency and place.
When I interrogated the code, it didn't come up. It just came up as historic area overlay and the state. But you're confident it applies?
Well, as confident as I can be in the algorithm. My own search yielded the same effect as the search that's in your papers. That is, those 3 overlays apply.
Hosking includes it, but Jake, you haven't included that.
Through the chair, I've given regard to the heritage adjacency. It is listed as a overlay that does get spat out by the code. My intent as part of the report was to capture the theme of state heritage and the historic area in one section of the report.
So you haven't discussed it in your report?
So the heritage impact and impacts of the setting have been captured as part of the singular theme in the report.
What are the specific? Okay, James, help us with what are the specific policies?
Sure. So if you start with the adjacency overlay, the purpose of it is to maintain the heritage and cultural value of state heritage places. So DO1, again, DO1 helps to inform the interpretation of the performance outcomes. PO 1.1 deals with built form. Development adjacent to a state place does not dominate, encroach on, or unduly impact on the setting of the place. Now, all of that makes it clear that the setting of the place is not what might be beyond the place, but it is the setting of the place, not neighbouring properties. It's looking at the impact of things adjacent on the place and the setting of the place. So the adjacency overlay itself doesn't protect the outbuilding or walls beyond the listed place. If you turn then to the overlay, I'm sorry I haven't cross-referenced this to your page numbers. But the overlay, again, applies to a broader spatial area than just this site. In quick terms, the effect of the overlay in almost all respects is by reference to the historic area statement. So its primary policy driver, if I can use that shorthand, is the historic area statement, and I'll come to that in a moment. That's clear from PO 1.1, and in addition, it picks up the prevailing historic characteristics of the historic area, and that phrase is used elsewhere in those performance outcomes. If you then turn to the demolition control, 7.1, buildings and structures or features thereof that demonstrate the historic characteristics as expressed in the historic area statement are not demolished unless. Now, you're then guided in that assessment by, in this case, Gawler South Historic Area Statement GA2. That is about bungalows and austerity. I'm just highlighting the elements from it without reading it all to you. You can obviously look at it in detail yourselves. In terms of architectural styles, double-fronted villas, semi-detached row cottages, bungalows, dwellings, etc., villas. Nothing about stables, nothing about this pub, nothing about that type of building. It is focused almost entirely on that residential form, except for particular representative buildings. And this is not, as I say, the outbuilding is not one of those. And if we go lastly to the State Heritage Place overlay, again, plainly that applies only to the place, i.e. what is within the confines of allotment 16. And it's a question then of what work discreetly is happening to that place. So spatially, that policy applies only to, in this case, lot 16. So I simply say this, whatever view one might have about the merits of this old building, as a matter of law, it is given absolutely no status whatsoever in the code. It's not a local heritage place. It's been on the list since 1985 or whatever it is. There's been at least one other review. It's never been picked up as a local heritage place. The characteristics identified, even back in the old Hignett survey, which formed part of the listing, refer to it architecturally. This is the pub building itself. The building has no significant architectural or engineering qualities. So again, nothing in that listing that refers in any way to the walls or the outbuilding. So there's no document of relevance as a matter of law under the code that does anything in any way to require you to, or even I would say permit you to consider the outbuilding in an historic sense as part of your assessment. Instead, you're looking at the balance of essentially the urban design criteria that form the thrust of the assessment of this sort of development.
James, we've been, I've been generous with the time,
thank you.
but we've interrupted you also. Is there anything else you want to put to us? They may come out in questions, so...
Look, I'm happy to answer your questions and be guided by that rather than sort of stab around in the dark.
Thank you. David? Jake? David? Beth?
Thank you, through the chair. I did have a question. A lot of this is about the reuse of the heritage place, adaptive reuse of the heritage place. And was there any consideration about staging of this application in terms of delivering those adaptations in any sequence with the actual proposed dwellings?
No, it's not proposed to split it in any way. The intention, I think, was more that the sort of construction methodology would probably dictate what happens first on the site rather than splitting it up. So, it was intended to be driven largely by the contractor rather than anything else.
Just a question was raised about the different walls on the site, and maybe lot 16 there's a little bit, but about details about a final plan. Is there anything that's been drawn up or that we haven't seen or seen?
As far as the reworking and replacement of the old stone walls, no, I don't think so. There's obviously some guidance in the due response around how that might occur in the conditions, but no, I don't think there's any further detail beyond what you've been given. The plan in general terms is that it's carefully dismantled, and as much of the fabric of that wall can be reused as is possible. There's I forget what they're called, capping or coping bricks on the top, obviously, that are perhaps most prominent. The rest of it's mortar over a sort of a rubble limestone with some brick quoin. So the intention is to reuse as much of that as possible.
Thank you. Anything else, Beth? Thanks. So a lot of the focus of your submission, as I understand it, is there a reason to prevent the demolition of the old stable building? My question is a different one, and that's about, if we look at this vista here, and there can be other angles and other vistas, we don't have the benefit of an overlay of the two-storey dwelling or dwellings superimposed over this photograph. But if we did, I suspect it would obliterate most of the view of the State Heritage Place, and of course it would remove and adjust the setting of the State Heritage Place because the stable building would be gone. If there was one less townhouse, and therefore the buildings were set back further, this vista would be largely preserved. By default, potentially it saves the stable building as well. I think there's probably enough policy and direction that we are obliged to take into account to view the State Heritage Place in the terms that I've just described. There are first of all, it's in the Heritage Statement about protecting traditional buildings that are related to the railway station, and that there's a lot of emphasis on the siting of new development to preserve vistas and settings. So this is a question not so much about let's try and save the stable building, but ensure that the new development is not having an adverse effect on the State Heritage item. Do you have any comment on that? And it does lead to the potential for an amendment to reduce the end building on the strip of townhouses on that site. I'm not in a position to comment on whether or not that's a concession. That was not my development, so I can't concede to drop anything. But respectfully, I would say that interpretation of the code's not correct. And the reason I say that is twofold. One is the text, context and purpose of the code, and secondly, the advice you've been given by your own Heritage Advisor and the Heritage branch of the department. The code answer is that to the extent that you're protecting vistas, if I can use that broad term, you must do so by reference to the terms of the code, by reference to the heritage values of the State Heritage Place. You find that phrase in
State Heritage Place overlay PO 1.1, 1.3, you see that reference to retaining elements contributing to its heritage value in 1.7. And again, the demolition policies for state heritage places are made with reference to those values, and I'll come to those in a moment. If you look at the historic area overlay, again, all of those tests, for example, the built form tests, are not in any way by reference to vistas of a state heritage place, but are either reference expressly to the values of the building or the historic area statement. And lastly, in the case of the adjacency, again, interpreting that policy, which doesn't give you much in the POs, DO1, development adjacent maintains the heritage and cultural values of those places. So values of the place is critical. You then turn to the listing itself to determine what are the values. And again, you've got advice about this from the State Heritage Branch. And I'm quoting, architecturally, the building has no significant architectural or engineering qualities. It is a good example of a typical hotel. So if one were preserving this for some romantic sense of vista, and I'm not suggesting that's what you're proposing, there's simply no warrant for that in the express values of the place as a matter of law. So for those reasons, I would respectfully say that that would simply be the wrong approach. Thanks.
Not just yet, but just as you're ready. Yeah. Members, does anyone want to start the discussion? Beth?
I don't want to start the discussion, but I do want to make mention in relation to the heritage adjacency. My understanding of the way that that is applied and the way that is called up in the code is because it is adjacent to other state heritage and other local heritage. So the way that my understanding of that particular overlay and the reason why it's called up is because across the road it's a state heritage place. So the intent of that policy, my understanding is so that we are assessing this application and its impact to that state heritage place and to that local heritage place. So that is my understanding of the way that, and the reason why that's applied.
Except when you look at the code, it doesn't call it up.
But it's listed in the algorithm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyhow.
So it's interesting as to whether it applies or not, but we've got a couple of submissions to say it is.
Yeah.
But I certainly wasn't able to get it to call up.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah.
Okay. So there's if we put aside, any arguments about whether this is not so much about the building, but about whether the new building, that's the building which is the contentious one, which is the stable, whether the new buildings fit well enough with the State Heritage Place. Are they designed and sited in a way that meets the multiple policies that talk about having a sympathetic form of development? Now, there's many that, there are many of them, and some of them, for reasons that James has put to us, don't apply. But there are broader contextual policies that do, and that one, it's not making a decision on the heritage value or not of the stable, but whether the new development is, in its design, its external textures, but in this case probably the most contentious one, the siting, is, to put it crudely, too close and too overwhelming to the State Heritage Place to compromise the umbrella set of heritage policies that apply. And more space around the State Heritage Place has the potential to enable the development to proceed, but also to provide some better context for the State Heritage Place. By default, it might cause the stable to be reused for something else because there would be that space. It's an approach that I support. It provides two pathways. One is either a refusal based upon a set of policies that support that opinion, or in the event that the applicant's happy to defer it for consideration of whether there's an amendment. Does anyone oppose the land being used for the density of development that's proposed? That's regardless of the site in question. So there's no argument about it being used for residential use, is there? No. Yeah, there's no argument about the traffic arrangements or anything else. It comes down to this question in crude terms, is it a potential overdevelopment of the site, taking into account the character and the visual questions, not the functional questions. So it's the subjective question about setting and landscape. David.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't been on the panel recently, but in the past we've talked a lot about scale and bulk and character, and I think that's sort of fits into what you've been talking about. So I'm sort of leaning whether staff will ask the applicant about the deferral to get that amendment, just so the whole development does fit in better with the historic place, but also the whole size, because the lack of setbacks and everything else as well, just in the open space as well as a concern. Just from some direction from the chair.
Beth, do you have any view?
I think this is a tricky site. It certainly lends itself for density because its location to the train station, the zone. There's certainly examples of this level of density, both on 18th Street and 20th Street, and even opposite the site. I guess, I don't think it's residential, but it is a sort of denser development. Equally though, the character of 12th Street is much more of your double-fronted cottages set within landscape gardens, well set back from the street, and there are a significant number of local heritage places on those streets, which really makes this quite difficult because you could argue it both ways. So I think it is important that it does balance those issues. So I think it could lend itself for a little bit less density based on 12th Street.
David, Jake.
Through the chair, firstly, I just wanted to say thank you to those that spoke to the panel tonight. I think we've considered a number of heritage matters at this panel over my time, and tonight it was quite balanced. I think there was certainly some passion there and some good points raised, but I don't think I heard that the site couldn't be developed for what was being proposed. It was a question of whether it was potentially overdeveloped, and there was some better options to be had by some redesign. However, in my view, we've dealt with the land use and some of the technical matters, and it does come down to the design and siting and scale in the context of the State Heritage Place. I think I lean with the assessing officer in the report that I do think it is tight, but I think through the design, as Mr. Levinson pointed out, it has been architecturally designed to complement and at different viewpoints add to the State Heritage Place. Whilst I think I agree on the flip side of that with your point, presiding member, that more space and less development would be a potential better outcome, I think my role as a panel member is to consider what's before me tonight and not perhaps try to redesign to get a better outcome, albeit there might be one, and that's for the other panel members to decide, I guess. But my position on the matter right now is that I would be supportive of the application.
David?
Largely echo those sort of comments. It potentially is very tight, and I've got some issues around some of those minor or technical elements to do with that tightness. The other part of this is very much to do with the heritage, and I guess we've been through the question around the outbuilding, and then there is the fences as well, and there's no detail around the fences, which is one of those elements that should be added to this, plus in reserved matter if we get there. But in terms of the fundamental nature of the development, land use is fine. In terms of the scale, I think it's okay. It does push things on setbacks. This proximity to the state heritage item is very much an element to be strongly considered, although I guess a preference would be for something greater in separation. Push comes to shove, I do think this is probably reasonable.
Okay. Beth? Sorry,
I think, in summary of my position on the application, I think it is a challenging one. I think this is a real legacy issue of the state heritage listing, and even if they reduce the density, I don't think I could sort of support the retention of the outbuilding because it's not on the listing, it's not within the place. Unfortunately, there are so many state heritage places that don't have all of the buildings that should be potentially on the listing. It's a real legacy issue. In terms of context, there are a number of applications like this that I've seen that they've just left with the facade of the building. So for the building to be retained in its entirety is, I think, a really positive attribute. So I think, on balance, and I realise it is a significant building for the area, but the listing is pretty clear in this case, and so I think on balance, in terms of the heritage, I am comfortable with that, and with the rest of the application, I think, as I said before, there is a character issue because it is at that transition area, but in the context of where it sits with the train station and the need for housing, I think it does, on balance, represent a reasonable development, so I would be happy to support the application.
In the event that it's supported, there's been a couple of suggestions that are potentially reserve matters. One would be about recording archaeological finds that, and there's historically there's been a standard condition applied to that, so whether that can be called up or dealt with in the final decision. And the other is greater clarity and scrutiny of the rebuilding of the perimeter walls. with those sort of broad concepts in mind, is someone prepared to move the recommendation? It's moved by Beth. Is there a seconder? With those provisos, with the delegation to the assessment manager to deal with them in the final decision? Yeah, okay.
Sorry, through the chair, but the applicant provides, detailed plans on the boundary walls.
Yeah, yeah, and that it's monitored carefully and those types of things, yeah. So we get a good outcome, okay, sorry, Beth?
In relation to the archaeological survey, the Act's recently been changed, so I imagine there's probably a standard condition that could be used.
Okay. All in favour of the motion? Yeah, yeah, yes. Oh, you've got others? Okay, sorry, go.
One's to do with landscaping.
Mm.
Trees are planted on top of pergolas in the outdoor areas, so that just needs to be resolved.
Sorry, they're planted on top of pergolas.
In the same place.
Right.
So that just needs to be resolved. Don't want to lose the trees, but needs to be resolved in respect to the pergolas. And the other... So yeah, just resolution in the landscape plan. In the common areas, there's 2 pergola structures and there's trees in the same place on the landscape plans. So that just needs to be resolved without losing the trees. The other element is to do with parking. 2 things, I'm not sure how we deal with it. One of them is to do with the designation of visitor spaces. Currently, they're not specifically designated which ones the 4 are designated for visitors as opposed to occupants. And then the other element is the parking that sits off the driveway. I think they're too tight from the point of view. They're only 2.4 metres wide, which is not the usual dimension for a casual space. So again, that's just a matter of detail that could be resolved as a reserved matter through the assessment manager.
Okay, you've got all those, David?
I'm just trying to get the conditions up. Maybe if you give us 5 to draft after tonight.
Sorry?
If you give us 5 minutes to draft them.
Yeah, well, I think we're happy enough to leave them for you to do tomorrow, by the sound of it. Just broad concepts for, it's a delegation to you. Yeah. Anything else, panel members? So we've got 4 reserve matters. One's about the archaeological questions. One's about the fences, the perimeter fences. One's about the clarity of the landscape plan. And one's about the, 2 relating to parking. One's a visitors parking and one's the width of casual parking. Those in favour of the motion? That's 3. Against? 2. It's carried. Thank you. The next item is concerning KFC. And do we have any representatives here? No? Yep. Jordan, would you like to introduce the application?
No problem, thank you. So this is to create an additional egress to the rear of KFC. So it is alterations to a car parking layout also done under the PDI Act over the last 12 months. It is connecting into an existing crossover that backs onto 11th Street. The point of the egress is to reduce traffic congestion onto the main arterial road there, Adelaide Road, during peak times. It will be for exit purposes only and help to reduce the amount of cars exiting Adelaide Road during peak hours.
Thank you. Karen, would you like to address the panel? Yeah. Oh, what I might say, is there anything the panel members particularly want to hear from Karen? No? Yes, David?
I mean, as a user of that car park, it isn't really working at peak times at all. So just how...
Sorry, the public car park or the KFC car park?
KFC.
All right.
Part, but it's just the way the traffic flows, it just all banks up and they all end up joining into one, trying to get out on the main street. But yeah, just... No, will this solve some? It's quite a terrible situation, yeah, without that opening.
Okay, so Kieran, the lead is this a solution to that problem?
I hope so, Michael.
David's got a question.
Oh, sorry.
As well.
The other issue, I guess, that goes with this is that exiting traffic later at night, so up to 11 p.m, out onto, is it Adelaide Road? In terms of the houses opposite, if you just want to make a comment on that.
To 12th Street, you mean?
To the rear, is that Adelaide Road?
No, it's 12th Street.
12th Street, sorry. Yeah.
Should be at 11th is direct, yeah.
I don't think we have to spend long on it, but over to you, Kieran.
Thank you, and thanks for the opportunity to speak. Obviously, with no representatives here, I'll cut to the chase, I think, and just hit the key points that obviously have been well articulated in the Planning Officer's report before you. So I guess the first point I'd highlight is that 11th Street is a public road already, which permits traffic at all hours of the day. Accordingly, there is traffic movements coming and going at the moment. Secondly, I think it was just alluded to then, when 11th Street was upgraded, I think it was around 15 years ago, a crossover was installed at the KFC site. So I think it's fair to assume that access to KFC at that time was anticipated. And this is reinforced by the fact that all the other businesses along that section of Adelaide Road and 11th Street have got a rear access onto 11th Street. The other point I'd highlight too is that KFC is anticipating it's only going to be a small proportion of vehicles using this exit. And I think that probably speaks to the point that you've made, Councillor, in terms of the workability or the practicalities of the existing car park. At the moment, most of KFC's vehicle movements are associated with the drive-through. And as you're probably familiar with that, when I went past today at 6 p.m, the drive-through was full, but the car park had about three people in it, 3 cars in it. So as I understand the issue, and locals would know this better than I do, but at the peak hour, which is 5 to 6 p.m, it's pretty much gridlocked along that section of the road. So the proposal from KFC is for, not for the drive-through traffic, but for the people that are in the car park, who are actually dining in, which are few and far between these days. At that time of the day, they've got an escape route, so to speak. So if Adelaide Road is chock-a-block, they can go out the back to 11th Street. No, they can't at the moment. And I think the point about the impact on the residents and the representatives on 12th Street is well made. I suspect that the majority of people using this new exit will actually, firstly, they'll only be using it during that peak hour. If the traffic's free on Adelaide Road, they'll go out Adelaide Road because that's more convenient. Secondly, they'll be using it and turning left to go down to 6th Street and then back to Adelaide Road. Because if you turn right and you go up to 12th Street, you can't turn right, you have to turn left. So you're restricted in your access. So it's only going to be a small proportion of traffic that heads in a northerly direction. So for those reasons, we think that this is a reasonable outcome. It's not going to dramatically increase traffic on 11th Street, and it's not going to create an unreasonable impact on the nearby residents.
Thank you. Any questions? No. Oh, yes, David?
Thank you. You clarified it really well for me. I suppose there's no scope at the moment to sort out the bottleneck where 2 lanes go into 1 for the drive-through windows. That's where everything just... And I've seen so many fights just about with road rage and everything else because no one knows how to merge, and it's just a nightmare. But I'm just... Seeing I've got you here, I'm just asking the question, but it is quite a terrible redesign outcome for people trying to use the drive-through when it's busy. It just is, it doesn't really work.
Look, I'll have to take that on notice. This proposal is solely about the rear access to 11th, which might help some of the issues, but that sounds like that's a bigger issue that KFC needs to look at. So I'll report back to them and see whether there's anything they can do.
Beth?
Yeah, thank you. I actually think it's a really good idea. I do have a reservation in terms of like once it is open, like that late night thoroughfare, and I kind of do get their residents' concern. Is there any consideration of maybe closing it after a certain time so there isn't any access after hours, like having some sort of gate or just something so that you're not getting that through traffic after hours, which I can imagine could be quite a nuisance?
Short answer, no. So they would prefer not to put a gate up there because that's another management issue, and I think the impact is going to be quite small anyway. So to go to that effort to put a gate up and then try to manage it, I don't think is necessary for this situation. So that's probably not going to happen.
Someone like to move the recommendation? Jake, it's moved. Seconder? David? All in, any discussion? All in favour? It's carried. Thank you. Okay. The next item is appeal matters. As an information item, still not resolved, there's no decision?
Through the chair, no, there's no resolution on this one.
Any other business by anyone? No. The meeting will therefore close at 8:08. And the next meeting, do we think it will be on the 8th of May or we don't know?
I believe there are a couple of applications that are looking like they will be presented in May. So at this stage, yes, we do have a meeting scheduled.
I think it's most likely I'd be an apology for that night.